Eileen, we have talked about your Toastmaster journey, and now I'd like to know a little bit more about your life journey.
Okay.
Could you give us a brief history of your life? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? Where did you work?
Yes, I actually was born in Los Angeles, and I went to the Los Angeles city schools until I was probably, I think I was 6 years old and maybe 6.5 years old. And then we moved to Whittier. There was actually not Whittier. We moved to another area of Los Angeles. I have to stop and think. Right now, I'm living in my 12th house my husband and I have owned. So there's a lot of houses. But I, as a small child, my mother had taught me to read by the time I was 3, and I was a pretty good reader. So I was able to start school when I was 4. And I didn't have a really good first day at kindergarten because obviously I'm short. I'm 5 feet tall now, and I was short when I was little. I went to school, and all the kids were bigger. And I know that the teacher said something about who put the water in the soap dispenser. Well, I looked up. I had to have somebody lift me up to press the button to get the soap out, and all the kids pointed at me. And so I got my hand slapped with a ruler on the first day of school.
Why?
But it didn't, because they said I did it and she believed him. How could she believe them? I was the shortest kid in the class. Well, anyway, it didn't bother me, except I did go home and tell my mother I complained. And she was pretty furious, and she came and stood up for me. And that's what I kind of do with Toastmasters. If somebody's been wronged, I kind of want to stand up for them. So, but I met my friend Rochelle in kindergarten, and we went through up until the middle of February of the next year. She had her birthday, but my birthday, my fifth birthday, hadn't come up yet. Right between the two, she was playing outside of her babysitter's house on one corner, and the other kids were over here. A man drove up and took her in his car, kidnapped her, and then we didn't know what happened to her, and then we found out she'd been murdered. So that's pretty hefty for a kid who's 5. But I remember it in vivid detail, and I remember the headlines. And there used to be like 5 newspapers in Los Angeles. And I always thought it was interesting. I thought the headlines were big, but I thought, well, maybe I'm a small child. I looked it up, and they were, and it said child kidnapped. It was the first that in the area that had gone like that. After that, everybody walked their children to school, locked the doors and everything. But my parents hid everything, the newspapers, and wouldn't let me learn anything. So I just went next door and read the neighbors' newspapers and talked to them about it. But I didn't realize that my curiosity and always wanting to know more would lead me to the job that I had when I graduated from a university, and that was to become a journalist. I always wanted to know more. I was always digging, trying to find out more. And the same with when you think about Toastmasters, you're going to give a speech, and you got to dig to find the good stuff to share with your audience. And so a childhood incident led me to a career.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very interesting. Who knew?
And you went to university.
I went to California State University at Los Angeles, which is off of the 10 freeway. It goes all the way into Alhambra, up the hills. It's a very large campus. Oh, that's true. Interesting was in my junior year, they picked 5 journalism students to follow some kind of a business and then report in your student newspaper about it. We had one person went with the Dodgers, one went with the Angels, one went with the LA Rams because they were there then. One went to watch a red light bandit called Carol Chessman die in the gas chamber, and the other was to be able to go to Superior Court and cover a murder case. I chose the Superior Court, the murder case. My friend, who was a little bit older, chose to watch Carol Chessman die in the gas chamber, and she did. If you want to know about him, you all can go to your computer and look it up. But yeah, he was a bad guy. But I followed a trial of a doctor and his paramour who killed his wife. And it was only supposed to last for probably 3 to 6 months. I followed that trial for 3 years, my junior year, my senior year, and my first year as a journalist, because it kept getting retried. So it was interesting, too, that the LA Times columnist at that time wrote about a young lady in a red dress who always left the courtroom at precisely 3 o'clock. That was me, because I had a full-time job aside from full-time student. I had to pay for it. So anyway, that was fun. But another of the journalists was a jolly Irishman, and he often would like to go out and have a few drinks with the guys in the afternoon. So he knew I took good notes. So he asked if he could use my notes. And I said, sure, they're all mine are going to student newspaper. So what I thought, well, that's not cheating. He knows what he's doing. So I did. And the day I walked into the daily newspaper in Covina, California, the San Gabriel Valley Daily Tribune, I was showing the editor of my materials, and I heard a voice yelling, hire her, hire her. And I said, I don't know anybody here. And then he showed up, and it was Tom McQuaig, and he was the guy I'd given the notes to. So I got my first job because of that trial.
What's the newspaper?
San Gabriel Valley Daily Tribune. Mm-hmm. So anyway.
So you have always lived in California your whole life? I
did, until my husband got a job as the night managing editor of the paper in Norfolk, the Virginian Pilot in Norfolk, Virginia, and we were there for 3 years, or 3.5 years.
Could you share some of the memorial experiences or stories from your time as a journalist?
I covered the Superior Courts in Los Angeles. As I said, that trial went on, and that was a major factor in my life, because it was something shocking to me, because I grew up in Whittier, where they didn't even have a bar. They just had churches. So when they held up the woman's dress, it was a white dress with, after 3 years, the blood stains. But those of us who were new at this, we could see red blood and the bullet holes. That was shocking to me. That made a very big impression on me, and it was something else that I learned. When I talk about paramour, a lot of people look at me, and I said I'd never heard that word before either, but it was his mistress. That was the other word. I knew that word, but I never heard the other. So that was definitely something that I do recall. I loved working in the education beat, because I went to the high schools and talked to the kids and interviewed them. And then I let them interview me, so for their student newspapers. It was really great. So I sort of had, from the adults in the high, where all the big time people come to a trial. Oh, at least once a week, the cast of Perry Mason was there, including Perry Mason sat in that courtroom because they were getting feedback for themselves to go put into their show. Mm-hmm. And I got to talk with them. Met a lot of famous people there. But the kids were really fun. They asked really great questions, and I felt like I was pretty important to them because they would introduce me to their parents. So it was good. We had a good vibe there.
I heard there's a book about you saving the Sacramento
Ah,
Victoria House. Could you talk
okay.
about that?
Actually, that was when I belonged to the American Association of University Women, and we took on many tasks in Sacramento, a lot of them. One of the things I did was I followed bills that were just starting out in somebody's house, and they went to maybe to a committee room and such. So I followed bills through the legislature along with the League of Women Voters, with that part. And then we discovered that the American Association of University Women discovered that they were going to tear down all the Victorian houses in Sacramento and put all modern. And we said, "Oh no, we're going to stop them." So we every weekend we would dress in Victorian costumes, and it was hot in Sacramento in the summer. And corset, I have pictures, and shoes up to here. We toured those houses every weekend for months. And then we put together a book called The Vanishing Victorians, which is probably in a library someplace. It was produced by the American Association of University Women of Sacramento. So we were pretty proud, and I still am, that we saved those Victorian houses.
What were the most challenging aspects of being a journalist, and how did you overcome them?
I come from the time when I was a woman in a university that didn't offer a lot to women in sports. I actually played better than the guys, so the coach would let me play with the golf team. We would go to the different golf courses, so I got to play free, but I couldn't be on the team because there wasn't one. Didn't matter what sport, I couldn't do it. So when I got out in the real world and I'm a newspaper reporter, I am short, and maybe guys are quite a bit bigger than I am. I figured out a way to get past them. If I had to walk underneath their arms, I got there. And I tried to ask really challenging questions that were honorable questions, not cheapy questions. And then I found out that people would talk to me when I would interview them, and they would tell me usually more than they wanted to, but they did tell me a lot of. So I had really good stories that I wrote, and I was proud of that too.
Mm-hmm.
As at one time I could be a woman and be a, a good reporter too.
What are the essential qualifications or skills a journalist should possess to excel in the profession?
Well, you have to know your what you're going to talk about. You have to read everything you can before. Say I was going to interview the governor, I would have to read everything that I could find that he's working on now and be knowledgeable, and then formulate questions based on that, and know, maybe watch some things that where he was not quite straight on.
Uh-huh.
So
Challenging questions.
yeah, so but it didn't matter if I was interviewing a minister. I still would read about all about him or her, know their background, and talk to some of the members to find out what they thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was able to write a story that people would be interested for the church pages when they had those.
Mm-hmm. How has the field of journalism evolved during your career?
Well, we went from being well respected to today, which unfortunately a certain person has made very bad comments about journalists, which aren't true. I would say there's a few journalists who are on maybe some of the magazines and maybe some of the TV stations where they're pretty biased. But my friends who are still in the business are very ethical.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're ethical because I know what they believe, I know their thoughts, and they try to follow the principle of telling the truth and presenting it to the public,
Mm-hmm.
and then let them make the decision.
Do you think a journalist or reporter should stick to the facts, or do you think they should have their own opinion as well?
Only if they can have their own opinion, but only if everybody knows that they're going to use that in that way. I wouldn't. I would go into it with just finding out what I wanted to know for the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's all kinds of interesting things about people. Should we talk about all kinds of things? Well, I kind of draw the line at a few things. I don't believe you should attack their children. So that's one of them.
Mm-hmm. So me personally, I'm trying to build up a YouTube channel,
Mm-hmm.
and the main content for that channel is to do interview people.
Right.
And I started with interviewing my Toastmaster friends. And so could you give me some tips about interview? How can I do a better interview?
I think you're doing well with what I've read about your questions. I think that at a point you might want to know the philosophy of the person, you know, how they live their lives. That might be something interesting.
Mm-hmm. Just get to know more about the person I'm going to interview.
Yeah. It's always good if you know something more about them before you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, have a pre-interview, because I used to do that on the phone.
Uh-huh.
I would call up my subject and I would talk to them for as long as they would talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, you know, do you have 5 minutes? And then after 5 minutes was up, I would say, well, you know, if you have to hang up, I understand that. Oh no, I want to.
Uh-huh.
So you would listen. I guess one of the best skills you learn in Toastmasters is listening. And that was something I had learned as a journalist. He who talks loses. So the best thing is just to be quiet, and they may talk for an hour and tell you more than you ever wanted to know. So that made for a good story, but it also would make for a good speech if you found out more, if you were interviewing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and when did you retire?
2000. 2000.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to retire?
My husband retired.
And you?
So I did too. And at that point, I had been a district leader and everything, but as he was winding down from his job, he said, now I will support you in anything you want to do and anywhere you want to go. You've gone all over, you've moved all over the country. So I will support you with whatever you want to do, which is a very gracious statement. And he did. He went to Toastmasters conventions. He went all over. And he could give the best 30-second elevator speech about why you should be a Toastmaster.
Wow.
And he never was one, but he could tell you why. But he was so impressed that first convention that we went to in Toronto. Well, one thing, he came back and said, this Starbucks coffee is $5. And it was about that big. But at the convention, he said, I was alone. I was just standing there. And he said 3 or 4 people came up and started talking to me. And then pretty soon they left and some others came up and started talking to me. He said, that's the friendliest organization that I have ever encountered. And he was right, because I sent a lady a couple of years ago who had just joined to Las Vegas to go to to Denver to go to the Toastmaster convention. And I just said, you won't be alone. And she came back and gave a speech about how she was embraced by all these people from all over the world.
I will certainly go to the convention someday.
Oh my, yes. That's an absolute necessary thing.
So besides Toastmasters, what else do you do?
Well, I've been a volunteer in some organization since I was 22 years old. And I think it had to do with the fact that there's nepotism clauses with the newspapers. So I couldn't work where my husband did because we were in the same area. So I had to come up with some other things. I could work on other newspapers, but I just decided I was going to do some volunteering and things I had not been able to do as a kid. Some people are able to volunteer doing things. So the first thing I did was I volunteered for a hospital, and they picked 3 of us to test newborn babies' hearing, and we had to be trained and how to sterilize our hands and instruments and everything. So I did that for a couple of years. That was really fascinating. And then I also, the Sacramento organization, I also worked on the Camellia Ball, probably for 4 or 5 years. I helped coordinate that as a very young person. So then I was in a junior women's club, just a lot of organizations that help in the community. And of course, with my kids, I worked with their schools or Girl Scouts or whatever it was. I taught my son how to use a compass and find his way. But he needs GPS today. He just wasn't good at it.
And also you're being a docent for the museum
Yes,
for a long time.
and that is a volunteer position. You actually go in and you're interviewed, and then if you're accepted, you study for 2 years. And it's quite extensive. It's like a university class. And you study all the art and all the backgrounds and all the systems. I had studied some art at the university, but not extensively. It was almost like you memorize the art and then you reverberate it back in a test.
So why are you passionate about being a docent?
It was so much fun. I tell you a couple of incidents where it touched your heart. We were asked to volunteer to come at 7 in the morning on a Saturday and meet some migrant workers' children who had never been to a museum, and they were age kindergarten through high school. I volunteered, and when they came, we realized that their parents had come too, which meant they gave up a work day. And when they told us that they'd never been to a museum at their ages, they'd never been. So they divided everybody up, and then we realized, okay, the high school kids don't speak English that well. So the kindergartners and the first graders spoke English well. So we got them together, and so I would tell them, simplified what I wanted, and then they would say it, and then we sort of got together, and they got more confident of raising their hand to talk about what color do you see and such as we're going through. So it touched your heart to see these people and these kids just gobbling it up. Like we say, Toastmaster sponges. Well, we gobble up all this good information. And at the end, the parents gave us hugs and cried because they were so touched. And they didn't know these kinds of things existed that they could do for free.
Which museum was that?
San Diego Museum of Art, here in the park. It's a big museum. In fact, it's expanding now. It's branched. The Photographic Museum and the Museum of Art have blended. So they're building a new building too.
There's a lot of museums at Balboa Park.
Yeah.
So, which one is your favorite?
Oh, of the Museum of Art, because it has all the great paintings. Yeah, and sculptures. Yeah, it's just really, you think you've learned a lot until you go back and you start learning all this before. I still remember a high school boy, John, and he threw his books out the window on graduation day. And he said, I'm never reading another book. And we all thought that was crazy. Well, it was. What a sad situation. Look what I've learned and look what he could have learned.
Was that museum good for toddler?
We started bringing my granddaughter when she was probably 5 months old in a stroller to the museum in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's modern art, bright colors, large paintings. So we started bringing her, and she would just raise up and she would look at those colors and such. And she even remembers some of it because we kept doing it. Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
How about toddlers? And they would run around, touching everything, wants to.
That's a deal. When I did the Montessori children, they were 3, mm-hmm. 2 or 3, and that's the ones nobody would take. But I had them sit on the floor in a line, and they couldn't get up. They were to sit there. But like I said, I gave them shapes and colors. I would hand out all the colors of the rainbow mm-hmm. to different people, and then shapes like rectangles or circles or triangles. And then I would show them in a painting where it was mm-hmm. so that they could see. Mm-hmm. Now, with my own children, they had to walk with their thumbs in their pants.
Yeah, don't touching.
Thumbs in the pants. Uh-huh. You can't touch. And if you take it out, usually you bribe them. Here's $5. If you take your thumbs out more than once or twice, the $5 you are going to have ice cream with or something. Yeah. You have to learn the tricks of the trade, what works. But I am very upset about a couple of incidents at the museum. We had a high school group come in, and the teacher didn't bring enough adults with them, which they let them come in because it was kind of a special high school, supposedly honors. Unfortunately, when I walked into one of the galleries, I saw a gentleman putting his hands on the painting. It's a Renaissance painting. Oh. Putting his hands on it. No. I used the kindergarten thing that the kindergarten teacher says, freeze! And automatically he pulled his hands back because I guess he remembered from kindergarten. And then I read him the riot act. Oh. And then I took him out and had him, he was a senior in high school, had him sit on the steps and wait for his teacher. And then called the principal because it had happened in the other galleries with somebody else too. Mm-hmm. That was not good. So that was one of the bad things. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned your children. How many children do you have?
3. Have a son and I have a daughter. And one daughter died at the age of 29 from a horrendous asthma attack. So, mm-hmm. And she left 3 children. They were 18 months, 3 years, and 5. And my daughter, who had a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old at the time, took all the children. So she's raised them. She and her husband have raised them in Minnesota. And they're all either one is still in college, the others all have their degrees.
Mm-hmm. What's your plan for the next 10 years?
Well, as you know, maybe not, that my husband died last August from Alzheimer's disease. And we had been married 59 years. This few days ago would have been our 60th anniversary. My daughter sent flowers up there at the anniversary. So that's a little tough to take. So I haven't really thought about it. And that's another speech I need to give because so many people, so many women or men are, widowers. What do you do? I have one person here whose husband died, and she's just selling things and doing things. Do you do that or do you not? I chose to think about it rather than make rash decisions. So I'm not sure she's happy as what she did. So I'm going to do some research on that, and then I'll be able to give a good speech about what you can expect from personal experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I do not know what I will be doing. I haven't really made up my mind what I'm going to do in the Toastmaster year this year. I still have time.
Do you have any bucket list?
A bucket. I pretty much through my life I've done what I wanted to do. I'm a blue collar kid who probably never expected to be where I am. I met my husband at the newspaper I worked at, the first first daily newspaper I worked at. He was assigned to be my mentor, and I really didn't like him because he was too tough. And about 3 years later, we started dating. And so he was from a family that was actually from Iowa. And when I met his mother, she had been an actress, and his father had been an actor, and their pictures are right there. That the mother was very well spoken. She has a college degree, as all of her siblings did that were on the farm in Iowa. Surprise. And I learned so much from her. Just things like I said, I'm a sponge. I'm just eating it up because I hadn't been some of those places. I hadn't been to a play before. And there I am in the Pasadena Playhouse watching a play. So it's an experience. I say whatever there's out there to learn, take a chance and learn.
Mm-hmm. And if people want to support you, what can we do?
I would say get in touch with me and we will see what we can figure out. If they need help, I probably could give them some help, or I could show them how to do it, or put them in touch with somebody who could.
Do you need any support?
I have so much from my docent friends and from my Toastmaster friends. It's amazing. I should say, when I first joined Toastmasters in '96, I was on crutches. And that's because I had blown a disc in my back. And for the first 3 years, I was on crutches. And if I went to an event, I had to stand. I couldn't sit. And my club, actually, Balboa Park Toastmasters, I lived in Mission Hills then, and they came to my house for their meetings.
Wow.
And one of the gentlemen built a lectern that I could hold on to because I couldn't sit. And then they came all the way up until my youngest daughter died in '97. And they were there. I didn't tell them she had died. It just did happen that weekend. But we were having a Christmas party and I didn't want to destroy everybody. So they noticed that I wasn't quite acting right. And then I told them and everybody cried. But it was really, the support was wonderful. Mm-hmm. I mean, they would come between the Toastmasters and the docents. They would bring lunch or bring cookies and tea for the afternoon because my husband was at work, because I was stuck in bed. Mm-hmm. Had to be flat. So that was pretty boring. It's kind of hard to read a book like that too for very long. But what support the Toastmasters have been. Wow. Can't ask for a better group. When you think they're able to support, you've seen the support they've given, but to be able to do that, wow.
Eileen, that concludes our second part, your life journey.
This is our wedding day, and this is my mother and my father, and this is my sister and my husband Doug. And this one's cool because as a Toastmaster, I was booking an event space and they said, drop your business card in. So I did. And they were remodeling their hotels all over, and they drew my name out. And so I won a trip to Seattle and dinner at the Space Needle and airfare for a weekend for my business card for Toastmasters.